fight back.
Alright, I can hear you now. Alright. Thanks for keeping up the pressure, the enthusiasm. I'm happy to talk to our MC.
Alright, how's everyone feeling?
Alright!
Fantastic, that's what I like to hear. Thank you all for coming again. Just to remind everyone, my name is Autumn Lake. I'm here representing the Minnesota Peace Action Coalition.
Good.
Thank you again for coming out this afternoon to stand in solidarity with the people of Venezuela and to stand against the constant threat of U.S. military, financial, and political aggression towards that country. Before I hand it off to our next speaker, I just want to bring in our previous points. I think one thing we've all covered and that we're all aware of is the fact that one fact stands out in contrast to the narrative propagated by the mainstream media in the United States. U.S.-backed regime change has never, in the history of since its inception, improved the livelihoods of people living in its victim nations, and it's likely that Venezuela will be no different.
Yeah.
In the news recently, you may have seen that there was a clash along the border of Brazil and Venezuela. And if you are an astute student of history, you'll know that these type of events, when they catch the attention of the American media, are often used as a pretext for increased American military aggression towards a country in its crosshairs.
Yes.
In these coming days, it's important for us to continue to mobilize as the United States continues to demonize the country of Venezuela, its movements, its government, and its people.
Yes.
Where do they stand? Where do they stand? Where do our senators stand?
So, I invite you to join me one more time. When the people of Venezuela are under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
When the people of Venezuela are under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
When the people of Venezuela are under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
Thank you all. We have one more speaker before we close out today. Representing the Minnesota Peace Action Coalition, we have CJ.
We must dispel State Department lies about Venezuela. Maduro's election was fair until the United States saw a window for intervention. It's the U.S. that installs dictators, not the Bolivarian Revolution. And no country which has suffered U.S. regime change has ever become more democratic. It's the CIA's playbook to falsely claim a foreign leader is undemocratic in order to justify invasion. And this isn't even about democracy, it's about oil. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, and now Harvard, they would have us believe that Maduro stole re-election. That's rich, coming from the elites who handpicked Juan Guaido, a man 81% of Venezuelans had never even heard of. To doubt the Venezuelan electoral process, which Maduro expedited by 6 months to May of 2018 at the request of his opposition, and which had over 300 international observers who audited 52% of its ballot machines against hand-counted votes. It's the height of hypocrisy, coming from a country where Trump lost the popular vote by 2.8 million ballots. The UN has praised Venezuela for cutting its hunger in half and becoming free of illiteracy under Chavismo. But our media blames Maduro for the artificial shortages of food, medicine, and financial capital from U.S. sanctions. They also report every mobilization of a few hundred to a few thousand people in support of the opposition, but conveniently forget about the more frequent protests, numbering in the hundreds of thousands of people in support of their government and against intervention. Remember that the neutral polling firm Interlaces tells us that 86% of Venezuelans are against military intervention to remove Maduro, and 81% disagree with the sanctions designed to remove Maduro. How's that for Venezuelan democracy? Dictatorship is an odd claim to make about a man who invited the UN to observe his election, a man who created a legislative body to literally rewrite the Venezuelan constitution after months of urging by opposition parties. Parties who, by the way, proceeded to boycott the elections for this body, likely because by their own internal polling, their approval rating can't even break 30%. They accused Maduro of buying votes with social programs continued from Hugo Chavez, who even the CIA recognized as improving the conditions of ordinary Venezuelans. To quote the fact book itself, the Chavez administration reduced poverty from nearly 50% in '99 to about 27% in 2011, increased school enrollment, substantially decreased infant and child mortality, and improved access to potable water and sanitation. This opposition calls for referendums, then boycotts them and commands the UN not to observe elections. Guaido himself, who U.S. media loves to label democratically elected, never even ran for president. He was elected as representative of a single region within Venezuela in 2015, and he didn't wait for the call of his people. It is public record that he waited for a call from Vice President Mike Pence before declaring himself president without a single vote. But electoral shadiness of the opposition is far from the end of it. Searching the name Orlando Figuera turns up reports of the dozens of Afro-Venezuelans these opposition parties have lynched in the streets. They're inviting aid marked strictly for Guaido and his supporters from Elliot Abrams, who used aid aircrafts to smuggle arms into Nicaragua 3 decades ago. The U.S. used forcing in humanitarian aid as pretext for turning Kosovo into a bloodbath in 1999. This is to say nothing of Airbus N881YV out of Miami, whose humanitarian aid for Venezuela included 19 assault rifles and 118 AR magazines. Last I checked, starving children can't digest bullets. That Guaido's fake government is a U.S. proxy and not democratically elected is further emphasized by his staff. Harvard University's Ricardo Hausman, who has had a morning after plan for Venezuela for 3 years and who wants to return to the wonderful Venezuela of old, according to him, when poverty consumed half the country, while indigenous and Afro-Venezuelans faced open discrimination. Then there's Marco Rubio's selection, Carlos Vecchio, an ExxonMobil lawyer, furthering John Bolton's wish of having American oil companies invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela. That Venezuelan oil profits go towards housing, education, and food subsidies, and not the satisfaction of corporate American greed, drives them insane. The CIA installed Saddam Hussein, but the second he tried to use Iraqi oil for Iraqi development, he became public enemy #1. As Haiti's own democratically elector, overthrown by the CIA, Jean-Bertrand Aristide says, "It is all about privatization, privatization, privatization." Parroting the false myth of Maduro's dictatorship justifies the militarism progressives claim to be against. Not only is Maduro not a dictator, but I know plenty of dictators installed by the U.S. Pinochet, Armas, Suharto, Trujillo, Batista, Branco, the Shah. What makes you think Juan Guaido will be any different? Hands off Venezuela. Money for jobs and education, not for bombs or intervention. Money for jobs and education, not for bombs and intervention. Money for jobs and education, not for bombs and intervention. Money for jobs and education, not for bombs and intervention. Money for jobs and education, not for bombs and intervention. Thank you so much, everyone. Hands off Venezuela!
Yeah!
Thank you, CJ. That's actually our entire program for today, if I'm not mistaken. So, thank you again for coming. Hands off Venezuela!
Hands up, Venezuela!
Thank you.
Pero